Following World War II, trials were held to bring those responsible for war crimes to justice. The most well-known were the Nuremberg trials, where key figures from Hitler's government faced judgment. While some were sentenced to death, other trials focused on crimes committed in specific locations, such as the Belsen trials. These trials aimed to hold accountable those responsible for the suffering at Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. The horrors of Bergen-Belsen were well documented, with footage showing the extreme suffering inflicted on prisoners. What shocked many was that some of the camp's guards were young women. These women had been influenced to commit terrible acts and were accused of taking many lives. Today, we examine the justice carried out against the female guards of Bergen-Belsen. Bergen-Belsen was originally established in 1940 as a prisoner of war camp. Located in Germany, it remained a POW camp until 1943, when the SS took over a section and converted it into a concentration camp. The site had several sections, including a residence camp, a POW camp, and a prisoners' camp. Over time, it housed individuals persecuted by the Nazis, including Jewish prisoners and political detainees. The SS further divided the camp, establishing different areas for specific groups, such as Hungarian and Polish Jewish prisoners. Between 1943 and 1944, thousands were sent to Bergen-Belsen, many forced into labor, such as recovering leather from old shoes. The camp also became a place where sick prisoners from other locations were sent, though most did not recover and instead died from disease, starvation, and mistreatment. In August 1944, a separate section for women was introduced, leading to an influx of female prisoners. Many of these women were later sent to other camps for forced labor. Bergen-Belsen is also known as the place where Anne Frank and her sister, Margot, were sent and where they tragically died. Overcrowding became a severe issue, especially as the war neared its end. By late 1944, Joseph Kramer, known as the Beast of Belsen, took charge. Under his leadership, the camp's population grew dramatically, reaching over 85,000 prisoners in a short time. This led to widespread starvation and disease, with outbreaks of tuberculosis, typhoid, and dysentery claiming many lives. Bergen-Belsen was initially built to house 10,000 prisoners, but as numbers surged, the conditions worsened. Estimates suggest that over 120,000 people passed through the camp during its operation. While there were no gas chambers at Bergen-Belsen, the overcrowding, malnutrition, and disease led to mass deaths. When British and Canadian forces arrived to liberate the camp in April 1945, the extent of the suffering was revealed. Heinrich Himmler had agreed to surrender the camp without resistance, and some SS guards attempted to conceal evidence of their crimes by forcing prisoners to bury the dead. However, the liberators discovered over 13,000 unburied bodies and 60,000 severely weakened survivors, many on the brink of death. Reports from journalists described the horrific scenes. One account detailed how prisoners were too weak to distinguish the dead from the living. Mothers clung to their deceased children, and starvation had driven people to desperation. The British forces worked quickly to provide aid, but many prisoners continued to die due to their weakened state. After the liberation, some SS guards attempted to suppress resistance by shooting prisoners who tried to access food stores. The British eventually forced SS personnel to bury the bodies in mass graves. Due to the severe risk of disease, the camp was later burned to the ground, and efforts were made to support the survivors. A key question remained: who was responsible for the suffering at Bergen-Belsen? During its operation, around 500 individuals worked at the camp. From September to November 1945, 45 former SS guards and staff members were put on trial for their crimes. Many around the world were shocked to learn that some of the worst offenders were young women. The Belsen trials lasted 54 days and featured evidence, including British military footage documenting the camp's conditions. Those on trial included Joseph Kramer and others involved in the camp's administration. Among the accused were guards, doctors, and cooks who had participated in the mistreatment of prisoners. Some of the most notorious female guards were Irma Gries, Elizabeth Volkenrath, and Johanna Bormann. Irma Gries, known as the hyena of Auschwitz, was only 22 when she stood trial. She had worked in multiple camps, including Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, where she was involved in selecting prisoners for execution. Witnesses recounted how she carried out brutal punishments and even set dogs on prisoners. Despite her young age, she played a significant role in the suffering inflicted on thousands. Elisabeth Volkenrath, another high-ranking female guard, oversaw female prisoners at Auschwitz before being transferred to Bergen-Belsen. She was responsible for selections and was known for her violent behavior. Witnesses described her as ruthless, often beating prisoners and even pushing an elderly woman to her death. Johanna Bormann, called the woman with the dogs, had served in multiple camps and was infamous for using her dogs to attack prisoners. She, too, participated in selections and carried out brutal punishments. Along with Gries and Volkenrath, she was sentenced to death for crimes against humanity. Other female guards, including Hertha Ellert, Ilse Forster, Hertha Boda, and others, received various prison sentences based on their involvement. Those who had committed multiple offenses were sentenced more severely. The executions of those found guilty in the Belsen trials were scheduled for December 13, 1945. The executioner, Albert Pierre Point, carried out the sentences by hanging. He used a precise method to ensure swift execution, calculating the necessary drop height based on the condemned individual's weight and height. Pierre Point later described his final interactions with Irma Gries. He noted that she remained calm and even smiled before her execution. At just 22 years old, she became one of the youngest individuals executed under British law in the 20th century. The Belsen trials served as a reminder of the atrocities committed during the Holocaust and ensured that those responsible faced justice. The executions of the convicted guards marked a significant moment in the post-war effort to bring war criminals to account for their actions.